This is the story of my journey in Mormonism, the spiritual experiences, and the discovery of what's true and what's not. Part 1.
So, a few days ago, I uploaded some stuff having to do with, secret societies and corporate governance, and basically the way that America is governed, and through corporate governance, through the corporations being owned by. Anyway, I'm not going to try to explain that right here, but between that and we just had general conference, and I wanted to discuss really the network of secret societies in that video, and a little bit about my coming to study these things a long time ago, and within Mormonism, learning more of the roots of Mormonism in Freemasonry and magic, and the use of mind control in the church, in many churches, and in our society at large, to manipulate the way that we think about things, and to help us to to help us be manipulated, to help us to reject thinking about things that are outside of the realm of which people who operate a lot of control over society or various religious groups like the Jehovah's Witnesses, Scientology, and the LDS Church, believe it or not, which thing I was able to throw down a lot of information on in certain videos. So here I'm just going to roll some stuff out of my life. It's going to include a lot of spiritual experiences and that sort of thing, because there have been challenges made as to why the LDS Church pushes so hard for subjective experiences to be so much more than historical evidence, or in other words, to throw out things which we actually can rationally look at and evaluate for truth, or for being inconsistent with being true. And this is characteristic of other high control organizations like the Watchtower, Bible and Tract Society, otherwise known as the J-Dubs, Moonies, Scientology as well, and others. So why does the LDS Church use behavioral control, information control, that sort of thing? And of course, you probably don't even notice it if you don't know much about mind control. But as if you learn about it, you can easily see it in the J-Dubs, and you see it other places, and then you see it on the news, and you can see it when you walk into primary. So I'm going to share a lot of experiences from my life that include how I came to be LDS, and how I came to find out that the Holy Spirit can witness to things that are contradicting each other, contradictory religions, contradictory material in Mormonism, and basically how the Holy Spirit really has destroyed its own credibility, or what we call the Holy Spirit, because it's more than a feeling. More than a feeling, yeah. And so we're gonna get into that, and let's go. We were just told in conference that the Book of Mormon must be true, and if it is true, then that means the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is the true and living church upon the face of the earth, and that the prophets that speak to us are teaching us as they hear from God the revelations from on high. That's essentially what one of the elders told us during the conference, and it's a theme that's been repeated over and over within the church. But how can that be true? I mean, if the Book of Mormon is true, does it really mean the LDS Church is true? Aren't there like close to 200 Mormon denominations? What would mean that the Brighamite branch in Salt Lake City is the one true church just because the Book of Mormon is true? That's a really good question. And this particular general authority didn't even broach that subject. But I'm going to broach a lot right here. And I'm going to take a look at what I'm calling this particular video, because we're going to learn about this. My journey in Mormonism with Masonry, magic, mind control, and the Holy Spirit versus falsified LDS history. What on earth am I talking about? Does that sound kind of like a convoluted group of things that maybe don't look like they're all supposed to be together? Well, guess what? They are. They really are. So I'm going to talk a little bit about my journey in discovering Mormonism, and when I found various aspects of Freemasonry, magic, and mind control in Mormonism, how I had to deal with that versus the witness of the Holy Spirit, which I experienced, at least for certain aspects or during certain experiences in my life, which of course everyone interprets as confirming whatever their belief system happens to be. So if you'd like to stay tuned for a good story, I think you're going to find a lot of interesting material involved with this particular story. Let's head back here. Well, I recently uploaded a video, a Mormon truth video, which is what I call these, and the title of it had to do with Christian teachings within the Book of Mormon and how those differ from the teachings that we find in the doctrines of Mormonism. And I've gotten some comments on it where people have taken offense to that and expressed an apologetic sort of an opinion. And one of the things that I've been hearing from a particular guy, he goes by Jedi Mormon. He wants to assert something that is a popular theme brought by the leaders, which is that the witness of the Holy Spirit trumps all things. As a matter of fact, during conference, in a particular talk, we heard, actually the one I was just referencing, where the guy said, well, you know what, if we come to the conclusion that the Book of Mormon is true, then therefore from that he'd like to extrapolate that out to mean the whole kit and caboodle is true with the church, then we can basically ignore all historical facts. What? You know, if you feel good about something, does that make facts no longer existent? However, that's the type of thing that we hear when we're told that we need to base everything upon subjective experience. And now, so the argument of Jedi Mormon has been the assertion that most people, and somehow he wants to group me in with this, feel who bring up that particular issue, that the Holy Spirit apparently witnesses things which are contradicting each other. For instance, there are plenty of people who are Jehovah's Witnesses or other, members of other churches that feel that they are the one true church and have a similar dogma regarding that particular issue. Their doctrines may not be the same as the LDS Church, but the way that they structure things with power and authority as being the spokesman for God bears a lot of similarity. And people in these churches have spiritual experiences, including Islam, where they absolutely feel from the core of their being that they have had a divine revelation to themselves personally that particular religion is God's one true church, God's truth. Whether they're in the Watchtower and they feel they're in the truth, or whether they're in Islam and they feel that Allah is guiding them, or Allah, or however they pronounce their deity. And in Mormonism it's called the restored gospel, because the whole idea, that the whole pitch that Joseph Smith gave at the beginning was he was restoring something that had been corrupted by the Catholic Church, and he was bringing back an ancient priesthood. Well, actually, he never even said anything about priesthood for several years, but an ancient gospel that preceded actually the New Testament times. So anyway, people have these experiences, and a lot of people that leave these churches decide that they weren't really spiritual experiences, that they were just emotionally based or psychologically triggered or something of that nature, whereas there are people who have experiences that are very certain that that's not the case, and those tend more often to be the people that stay in the church or church is after they have discovered irreconcilable contradictions within the religion, within the religious text, or the church's history, the scriptures, the doctrines, the way that the church is administered, and so forth. Whether it's within the Watchtower with the Jehovah's Witnesses, or within the LDS Church with the Mormons, it's that way. So at any rate, these spiritual experiences tend to really keep people in. And Jedi, in his he regularly hits my my YouTube comment section these days, which is nice, I suppose. He's not a bad guy. He just he is very convinced that this witness that he has received is exactly what he believes it to be. The spiritual experiences he has had, which he hasn't discussed with me, he fits them into his belief system. So whoever the spirit is that's witnessing it must be the Holy Ghost of Mormonism. And, it's the Holy Ghost or Jehovah God, to the J-dubs, and it's Allah to the, Muslims, and so on and so forth. Everyone adapts it to their own belief system, because when they have the spiritual experience, that there's a spiritual presence, being some sort of profound experience that's going on, and they feel really good about it. I'm generalizing, and so naturally you're thinking, well, if I'm having this religious experience, in conjunction with exercising my own religious beliefs, then it must be ratifying that this particular religion is true, which seems pretty logical. So, so Jedi seems to think that everybody just discounts these things and says that they're just emotional experiences, and for the most part, he's correct. That is what I have noticed in, say, maybe 90%. Well, those are someone else's figures, but those are the figures of approximately that people who have left the LDS Church seem to be in line with, saying that they don't believe in any sort of a spiritual world, and they're pretty much, going in an atheist route. Some turn into Christians, but not many. And why is this? So is it just the people whose experiences were on the weak side that leave, or do people find these contradictions, and despite a strong spiritual or multiple strong spiritual experiences, decide that a spade is a spade? If Jesus lies in the Book of Mormon, then obviously it cannot be true, can't be depended upon, because the definition of God is that includes him not being a liar, and we have that in the Book of Mormon, also being omniscient and unchanging. And so as Jesus violates these things, or proves that he can't remember what he said in the prior chapter or even in the prior verse, as he inspires Joseph Smith, or places upon the rock in his hat the words to put in the Book of Mormon, according to Emma and David Whitmer, and it's printed on LDS.org now, then that's a problem. Well, anyway, so I thought I'd get a little bit into my story then, because I actually have had I've had spiritual experiences which cannot be explained by the rationales of psychology or emotion or any physiological thing, because many times they've involved sometimes they've involved other people, and there are various factors, physical objects being moved, including people, kind of things that people learn about in the occult or magic or parapsychology, they might call it, paranormal things, and multiple people, seeing a presence enter into the room. It's like psychologists would love to tell you that you're hallucinating, but when everybody else is and no one is using drugs, and people that use drugs don't generally not know the difference between something they imagine or visualize or have some sort of a hallucination of. I've talked with people that have had experiences that were rather vivid, and in no way did they believe that was actually occurring. They were able to differentiate very easily. So as much as some people that that work for the so-called professions in that area would like to assert that people are imagining things, that gets really tough when you're talking about multiple people. Like having a missionary discussion, and someone from the spiritual world enters the room, and it is known by multiple people. So that's that doesn't work for your for some of the explanations that they give. Anyway, so do I want to go over some of the things that I put in what I think is a pretty cool graphic here, or do I want to start with the beginning with my life and share some story? I did say I'd do some story sharing, so I'll do that. And we can notice some things up here. We've got top left, we've got symbol that might be representative of witchcraft, and then we've got the Nauvoo temple down below it, and going along the bottom there, of course, we've got Freemasonic emblem there with this square and compass, and then of course the all-seeing eye, which is also associated with the Illuminati. Anyway, then we've got the Knights Templar cross there, and we've got the brown seer stone that Joseph Smith supposedly used. And I got a little, I put it inside of a crystal ball there just to emphasize the magical properties of that. And then we got a ring up there with the Knights Templar and, square and compass on it. And then down below again, more on the Book of Mormon, lower right and left, Knights Templar insignias. And they're really important because Freemasonry and the mystery religions and magic and all these things are part of Mormonism. As much as the church would like to distance itself from its spiritual roots in mysticism and appear to be super mainstream, it is what it is. And when we read about how Joseph Smith supposedly translated the Book of Mormon, I mean, either we go with the magic glasses out of Ether chapter 3 that we're prepared for it, or we go with the magic rock that I've got there in the upper left hand portion of the Book of Mormon that his wife Emma said he used, and that David Whitmer, one of the 3 witnesses, said he used. And they both said they watched him doing it. So in any case, we're dealing with a magician, which doesn't work too well with what Christianity teaches about that, or even Judaism, since we've got that in Isaiah, the condemnation of the wizards. Well, are these spiritual witnesses real? Are they true? Like Jedi says? A lot of people say that, and I've had experiences, like I said, which are many of them. Some of them are just, they don't fit in within the bounds of explanation from emotional stimulation or psychological factors. So, from what I've read, another fellow who was basically working as an apologist for the church, not paid, but, well, he wrote a book, an apologetic book, and he did a tremendous amount of research. And he was a guy who had a lot of experience with the spiritual world. I mean, really, magic stuff. And he wound up, through his research, he could no longer defend the church's whitewashed history. It's rewritten history, just like the history of many things, including the United States, has really been greatly distorted. And that's part of how I began to realize that Mormonism was not giving us this. We weren't getting an honest story in the Book of Mormon and in the church's teachings as to the history of the United States, for instance, and how could Jesus lie. And what I found is over and over again that was the case. All right, how about a chronological start now? Let's go back. Let's go way back. Because people that have spiritual experiences, sometimes it's always been that way. So, I can't say that before I was born was a spiritual experience, but I used to more vividly remember it. And I'm not talking about the premortal existence that we're told about in the Swedenborgian doctrines of Mormonism. I'm talking about just waiting to be born. And I have no idea how far back that went, but I used to recall those things. I remember being mocked for sharing that with a friend, so it's not something I repeat much. Of course, not putting it on YouTube, possibly, huh? Anyway, so when I was born, the first thing I saw that I recall seeing was my arm. I believe it was my right arm that I was looking at, and I had this question come into my mind. My question was, how in the world did I get so small? And so, yeah, I think about that. What does that imply? How did I get so small? Where would I get that thought from? If this was my beginning, then I would have no reference point of ever being bigger. Now, I don't remember, the world or whatever experience that was from. I don't remember what it was, but I thought, how in the world did I get so small? And then the next thing was I was answered. And I can't say I heard a voice in English or something, but I was shown an answer and given an understanding. So I saw my dad, and I believe he was standing near the doorway. This was in the hospital. I was born in a hospital. And I saw my dad, and it was given me to know that I would eventually, over a period of time, so yes, I understood that time existed, grow to a size to be like him. So this was information given to me on, in like the delivery room. So it's like right after I was born. How many seconds or minutes, I can't say. So all of these things tell me that I had previous experience, knowing that, as a full-grown person. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been thinking those thoughts. And obviously the concept of time was something familiar to me. I cannot say that I heard something, and obviously it wouldn't have made sense that it would be English. I mean, I didn't know English obviously yet. So that's an early experience that I had with what I could call the spiritual world, because something gave me this information. That there was a communication process that went on, because I asked a question and I got an answer. Okay, how's that? Maybe that's a little unusual. Actually, I've never heard anybody say quite that. I did go to a meeting once where the guy said he remembered. The speaker was saying he remembered the premortal existence and stuff, and then he didn't want to talk much about it. It was one of those deals like they like to do at church sometimes, you know, when you got a small group meeting or in the temple where they hint, yeah, the Savior's walking the halls, that the brethren are meeting with him today, or whatever, some kind of privileged thing that's really special and sacred, and just keep it hush hush, but, you know, you're getting closer to the Lord, just keep following the brethren. So, anyway, life was not real fun, and my parents didn't do real well with their relationship, so they broke up when I was pretty young, and it was very disturbing to me. Certain things were very disturbing to me. Watching someone get killed on the television, you know, was very, very disturbing to me, and I have memories of that. You know, it was very disturbing. I'm not talking about a movie. And at any rate, so my folks broke up, and I was very troubled about life and death. I was very concerned. You know, I learned about death, and I wasn't happy with it. And these things concerned me a lot. I have memories of lying in my bed at night and thinking about, you know, what's the deal, and how do we avoid death? And at any rate, I was about 6, got stuck in a school, and it wasn't the first experience in a school, but I recall, you know, we had left, moved away, so it wasn't with my dad anymore, and I was going to go to school, and I said, well, what do I tell him about, you know, what's my religion? What's my religion? And Mom said, tell him you're a Unitarian. I'm thinking, what the hell is that? And I thought, does that mean you're supposed to wear some little white, you know, like yarmulke or something, one little white hat on your head? No hat required. You're good. Okay, great. And I had serious questions about religion, so I remember talking to this little boy, and I just asked him all the questions, you know, I was asking him, and he was Catholic, so he was telling me about purgatory and that sort of thing, and yeah, so that was you know, first grade, and anyway, so we came back to the local area after, you know, whatever, 9 months away from Dad, which is pretty traumatic. The whole thing was super traumatic, and I started watching the Mormon Tabernacle Choir on Sundays, and I would close the door to the study and say, don't disturb me, I'm going to be watching my choir. So I'd watch, it must have been like the, you know, the spoken word or something, so they'd sing. And so I still have remembers of that. I can see it, you know, I can see the television there, and, you know, the pipe organ and all that. And I listened to that, and I liked it, you know, I connected with it somehow. I asked my mom to take me to churches. I was trying to learn to see, you know, what was this deal with religion, with God, and so forth. Was, you know, what's the scoop on this whole eternal life thing? I had a Bible, and I, you know, with pictures in it and stuff. And as I learned to read, I had read stories, I guess, and I remember vividly the book, right, in the Bible now, and the stories in it and so forth. Most of them are pretty disturbing, obviously, if you think about them. They're disturbing to anyone, especially a child, when you're looking at these things. But, you know, I only got to go to churches a couple of times, probably like Lutheran church or something. And apparently things just fizzled out with that sort of a thing. And I had, you know, the Time Life, you know, books on evolution and, you know, all sorts, you know, all kinds of zoological things. So I thought this made pretty good sense. I remember my friend coming over, like, and him talking about God, and I just said, hey, dude, you know, we came from, like, you know, amoebas and protozoas and stuff out of the ocean, turned into monkeys, you know, over millions of years, pal. They've got, you know, charts, and they have pictures of these things, all right? You can check out the books. I don't know where you get this superstition. So I pretty much became convinced that was the case. I read a book on cryogenics when I was 9, trying to learn if there was, you know, possibility of surviving, you know, go into a freeze for 100 years now and again, and see what the technology had developed as far as trying to make it so you could live forever. Uh, anyway, that was my next strategy, and began to just not think about the whole God thing anymore because it didn't seem to make a whole lot of sense um, from what I had looked at. And anyway, my little Christian friend he was a nice boy and all, but I didn't think his beliefs were very well founded. And so we had this, so the whole spiritual thing with the family started kind of like, in some ways, where one of my brothers got lost when we were, in an area where, there's a lot of people. And he had a little pal at his nursery school or something that told him about praying. And so he prayed to know where to go, where the family was, because, it was a huge crowd and, he was lost. And so he got basically a revelation, according to what he said. And he was shown where to go and where we were, and so he went there. And so, of course, when I heard this, I guess I was a little bit not, maybe I kind of mocked him. I was like, "Oh yeah, right. So what, did God speak to you?" I don't remember saying it. I do remember actually the day. I don't remember saying that, but I've been told that's what I said, which probably is correct. And he, was a little stoic little guy, and said, no, he put it in my mind. So anyway, that kind of hit my mom pretty hard, because so anyway, mom and dad, had pretty much, done the college route, and they were all they learned their evolution, and although they had investigated some religions and gone to a whole bunch of churches probably before I was born, they didn't find anything that felt right. So skip ahead a little bit, and so I'm about 13 or so now, and I guess I want to talk about mind control here, because it's super important. Mind control is so important because it's used so much in our society, and most people have no clue about even what it is or how it's used. So it's used in a lot of high control religions, and then it's used, more overtly in some organizations that were really, are better publicized. Such as really culty organizations, Jim Jones and the People's Temple and all that kind of stuff. But it's also used very much in the media, and I learned about how that takes place. And a lot of the tactics that are used, I saw how it was used in the media and that sort of a thing, and used to make sure that people think according as they are wanted to think by those who are in control of organizations or society at large. And so we see that there's so much influence used, when you talk about peer pressure at school, that sort of thing, or in the media. For instance, right now we have the political correctness movement going on, and what I notice is that people say things much different than they were saying, a number of years ago on various topics. It's as though they're enlightened now, and everything else, the way people thought, a few years back was just wrong, and they feel like they're so enlightened now. But not everyone necessarily agrees with all of these points of view. And I noticed that what people can assume is absolutely, the whatever you want to say, the God's truth. A generation or two or six ago, things are completely different than what they are now. And I mean, now it's held that such and such is the right thing by many people. And like I said, you look back in time, and things are much, much different. And at any rate, that's because of the way that views are shaped, and by pressure. That is, we've got information control, we've got behavioral control. If we look at the Catholic Church burning people at the stake, it's a pretty strong example of behavioral control. I mean, you say you follow the Catholic Church or you burn, okay? They controlled, they controlled a lot of information, including the scriptures, which they came up with in the first place anyway, but then they didn't let people have very free access to them, and we can see various controls exercised, and now each generation thinks that they're the new enlightened one. And so when we looked back at the time of Joseph Smith, they're all practicing, magic and witchcraft, and guess I better take a break here. Okay, so at any rate, I learned different times of my life. I studied various aspects of mind control, and I was able to recognize aspects of it being used on people, especially in groups, actually. So for me, I'm able to recognize how groups manipulate people, um, or individuals manipulate individuals or groups, and it's pretty fascinating. So when I was a young fellow, not super young anymore, but young enough, and we moved far away from Dad, and actually I ran into some spiritual stuff when I lived with Dad when I was in fourth grade. I there were some weird things going on there at the house. Um, they're kind of into the new. They were into the whatever was going on, the new hedonism, the new age, exploring things, and there were stepbrother, stepsister. Environment wasn't exactly Mormon style, should I say, and there was some experimenting going on with the occult at times. At least I recall a particular occasion, and I witnessed things happen that were frightening. Um, People operating a spirit board, and weird things happened in that house. Maybe I'll just relate one right now, although this happened later on when we were a bit older. So stepbrother and stepsister were not in the house. I don't know where they were, but they were not there that night. And so my brothers were in stepsister's room spending the night, and then I was in stepbrother's room, and there was there was a basement, and it was just kind of a hacienda, and Dad and his wife were in another room, actually on the other side of the house, across a large living room and down another hallway, and far away. At any rate, I was awakened. I don't know. I'll say like 3:30 in the morning that night. The dog was going ballistic, and that was not normal. This was a house dog, and so I went into the room where my brothers were, and my dad came running in there too. He was awakened because the dog was going absolutely, you know, ballistic, and the dog was trying to get in the closet. And this is an older, Spanish home, so it's probably 100 and some years old. I don't know. So this is the kind of door that opens like your front door. It swings open. There's a knob, and you open it like a regular door, not like some kind of sliding door. And the dog was barking, clawing at the. He was just going completely nuts. He woke everybody in the house up, everybody that was asleep. And so I went in there, my brothers were in there, and they were sharing this, rather large bed, and they were both petrified, and they both told the same story. They said a guy walked into the room, they described him, and then he opened the closet door, and it's just a little closet, and he disappeared. And the dog saw it, and the dog went completely stinking ballistic and was still going nuts. So Dad's like, all right, I'll get a baseball bat or some shit, and excuse me, and open the door, or whatever Dad did. And he opened the door, and there's nothing in the closet, right? There's no visible secret doors or anything. But I mean, my brothers both saw the guy, and they were just, he was like a ghost. He wasn't. They could tell he wasn't mortal, and he walked in there and disappeared. And later, we discovered that other people had seen the same guy, basically same description. And say what you want, but the dog saw him, and the dog woke everybody up in the house. And I never heard the dog ever do that, and I lived there for a year, and nothing ever happened like that. So they both saw the guy, and they were petrified, and he looked at them and stuff, and then walked in and went in there. So anyway, my stepsister had similar experiences when she was, with her boyfriend in that room. They both saw him. So the spiritual world, I did not see that guy, but my brothers did, and the dog sure as hell did. So, we didn't sleep the rest of that night. We went down to the basement and watched Laurel and Hardy. And I thought, well, maybe it had something to do with the Ouija board, being directly under the room. So I probably burned it the next day or something, destroyed it, threw it in the trash. But I thought, well, it's Satanism or something. So, at any rate, thought I'd relate that. So that's one of those things that cannot possibly, that was not an emotionally driven experience. My brothers were awakened or something, and then they saw this, and the dog absolutely behaved as though, calming the dog down. I mean, when the dog checked out the closet, obviously the dog saw something. So, and I've never seen the dog like that. Okay, so you don't know me, so that's just a story for some random dude, so it may not mean anything to you, but it meant a lot to me because it was, part of the framework in which I saw life. I didn't, like I said, I didn't see the man, but I've had a lot of spiritual experiences. So, we'll jump ahead now. So I mentioned mind control and people being manipulated. So people are manipulated to reject people on various bases as they're programmed by the media to call people, not part of what's supposed to be normal. If you believe something that's outside of what the media tells you is normal, then they try to discredit you as nutty or something, a conspiracy theorist. If you're a witch hunter, if you're looking for, something wrong in the government, that sort of a thing. All these techniques are used with pressure to get people to just go to think in a certain way. And if you don't know anything about it, I don't expect people to comprehend it, based on me saying a couple of sentences. But if you study mind control techniques, you can learn that it's very effectively utilized in many organizations, and it's well known. So there's, the popular book by Steve Hassan, what is it, Combating, Mind Control or Cult Mind Control or something like that, and a lot of ex-Mormons know about that book. And so, oddly enough, they can see it in that, but they can't see it in the media, and a lot of them have turned super liberal, and so if you mentioned that there's secret societies that still exist, they'd say, oh, you're a conspiracy theorist, and I was like, oh, okay, so you're responding to mind control that you receive on Fox News. Shit. Unbelievable. So you can see it in one thing, but you can't see it, in another, and that's the way it happens that way. So at any rate, for some reason, we began studying, realizing, someone, maybe a friend of my mom's or something, started talking to her about, subversive forces destroying the freedom of the American people. So anyway, that was John Birch Society's situation. So you've probably heard stuff from the left-wing media that denigrates the John Birchers as witch hunters or McCarthyism and Joseph McCarthy. Say what you want, but when they put together the Reese Committee and Committee on Un-American Activities, they found all kinds of communist cells operating and having front groups like Students for Democratic Society and all kinds of things. I mean, there's tons of stuff that's factual that you just, but you're trained just like the Mormon apologists do to look upon someone as, oh, you're an apostate, you're an anti-Mormon, you're evil, just because you didn't want to, your wife didn't want to give in to Joseph Smith when you're out of town or something. And so her reputation is ruined because Joseph Smith spreads all these rumors with all the, the spiritual wives and so forth. The amount of power and control that's exercised through secret societies is unbelievable. And we had that in the church with the Danites, and you read about it in the Book of Mormon, the Book of Moses, and then you wonder, well, why would Joseph Smith create, the Danites and the Council of 50? And I know apologists will try to say he didn't create the Danites, but you read enough about, you read the Danites' own testimonies, and, there's plenty that's corroborated. The whole obfuscation program is nothing new. And it's nothing new in society. So we were studying this kind of stuff, and so I learned about how the media does these things. I learned the techniques, and I watched it, and so we got an education on the Constitution itself and representative, government, or at least what it's supposed to be, as we studied all that sort of a thing, and then we saw how things were manipulated and using like the Hegelian dialectic and so forth. Having front groups on either side of a political issue apply pressure, which appears to be spontaneous, like, oh, we got riots all over the country at one time, well, it's spontaneous. But once you learn who's behind it and how it works, and they've got cells or chapters, whatever, in all these various areas, things can be orchestrated from a central basis. And at any rate, so I studied some things, and at any rate, the Birch Society was about the Council on Foreign Relations, which is totally verifiable stuff. You can see on CFR.org right now. The existence of this, and if you check out their goals and so forth, it is to create a world government. So, and the United Nations is basically, part of the framework of that. So, these things, they're smeared in the news as, oh, that's conspiracy theory. But if you investigate the facts, if you take the time, like they say, the devil's in the details. So we learned about these things, and about that time, a lot of other things started happening in our lives. And particularly with me. So I'm going to relate, because this is going to relate to, like I said, I'm going to tie in a lot of spiritual things, the witness of the spirit, the Freemasonry, magic, etc., and Mormonism. And yes, it all does tie together. If you study history, not in the stupid textbooks, but if you look at more primary sourced things, you will find that Christianity, the mystery religions, magic, science, alchemy, Freemasonry, pretty much you'll find all of it together if you go back far enough. And if you read a good way to read that would be like reading Albert Pike, reading out of like Morals and Dogma of the Ancient Accepted Scottish Rite of Freemasonry, and you'll see him talking about all of these things together as as one. And if you look at like the history of Sir Isaac Newton, you realize he was a magician, a sorcerer, so forth. There's a Freemasonic book about it, by some high-ranking Freemasons, like head of the Grand Orient, or not Grand Orient, well, French Lodge, Grand Lodge of France, and so forth. Really reputable within Masonic circles, high-level guys writing about, Newton as a sorcerer and a scientist, and his English royalty, or he was titled Sir Isaac Newton. He was involved in the banking there and everything. If you look at his writings, a lot of it's not about science. About half of it is, and it's about half of it. In other words, science and alchemy and magic were considered together, but they separated those things for our textbook so that we would not associate them together. But if we look at the people that are leading society, they're mostly involved with secret societies and are Freemasons in many cases, which tends to be the meeting ground for a lot of these secret or secretive societies. And I wound up studying a lot of those kind of things, and it's pretty amazing. Basically, you see that the world is run a whole lot different than they tell you on Fox News or CNN or, MSNBC or whatever. So, anyway, so we met some pretty nice people that were involved with, trying to prevent basically subversive groups from destroying the Constitution of the United States. Sounds pretty patriotic, right? Well, some of these people happen to be members of the church. They were Mormon. And so one of them came over to visit my mom and invited her to a particular open house at the church. My mom had a pretty intense spiritual experience at the moment, and what happened with her, and she didn't tell me about this right away, but she saw a light appear around the mother and her two sons when they were inviting her. And she was trying to say that she was not interested, or that, she'd let them know or whatever. But out of her mouth came words which were not what she was trying to say, which was like her body was controlled. It was really weird. But she said, I'll be there. And she's like, sheesh, I'm stuck now. How did that come out of my mouth? It's not even what I planned to say. But she did notice, she saw like a pillar of light come around these people while they were talking. And that was pretty impressive to her. But I don't recall her telling me that early on. I've since learned about it. But preceding that, see, things were going on with me. And so my mom, left town, way out of town, for the weekend to go visit her parents. And I guess my brothers went to my dad's house, and I was all alone. And a couple friends came by Friday afternoon, evening-ish, afternoon-ish, late afternoon probably. And so one of them starts talking about some experiences that a friend of his has had, a guy that I know, from like grade school. And, I didn't know the guy. I knew who he was. I just didn't hang out with the other guy. They were a few blocks away. I just didn't hang with those guys. And, anyway, he relates this spiritual experience, which was, on the dark side, shall we say, really dark. And of course, we can say, oh yeah, well, people tend to get scared when somebody tells a scary story or something. But I mean, it wasn't like dark yet even yet. But anyway, my mom was gone. They were gonna like spend the night, so we were like hanging out, and I was gonna be alone. We would play Scrabble or Monopoly or something like that. It's not like we were gonna throw a keg party or anything. I was like 8th grade or something. Um, it's Anyway, so a presence entered the room, and these guys, everybody was, scared. And these guys they're scared. And they said, well, cancel the plans. We're out of here. You're on your own. Like, thanks. You guys are awesome. So there I was by myself, and it wasn't just an emotional thing. There was a presence, and it wasn't cool. So I called someone that I knew that was, affiliated with my mom and, business matters and stuff. And I knew that she was religious, and she was Baptist, I guess. And so, a couple of people involved with my mom in business stuff had left some Gideon's Bibles, I guess. So we had them, and although I hadn't touched a Bible in a long, long time, so I said, hey, here's what's going on, and this is, I'm scared. There's something here. This is not good. And she said, just pick it up and start reading, the front of the New Testament. So I did. And the experience I had was that presence left, and then I felt, if you're LDS, and you're accustomed to, if you had experiences where you felt like you felt the spirit, well, that's what I'd say. There was like a light, the room seemed to light up more, and there was a presence that felt really nice, actually, and comforting, and I started to believe what I was reading. So I started reading the Bible. And so I had been reading the New Testament for a while, and really trying to whatever, find truth or something at this point. And I'll mention at this point that for like the previous couple of years, my closest friend, his dad was a minister, a Methodist minister. And so I attended their church sometimes, and I also attended, like, I didn't go to their church all the time on Sunday, but I did go sometimes, once in a while at least. I remember sitting in there and feeling, interested in the sermon and stuff that had to do with, Jesus, I guess. And I did go to MYF, Methodist Youth, whatever. I did the Christmas Carol thing and all that kind of stuff, and met various people that figured into my life. Kind of weird, including the wife of my youth. So, although I didn't even talk to her, actually, but she was there singing, I remember. She's a foot taller than me at the time. So, anyway. So the guy had wanted to baptize me, and I was like, nah, that's okay, not happening. Because I didn't feel like he had any kind of authority or connection with God. I spent a lot of time at their house, and, he was a nice enough guy, but I thought, he's nothing like one of these Jesus disciples. He has no authority from God, that's for damn sure. Anybody that tells his boys to go outside and fight, to settle something rather than, than create peace. There's just things that went on there that, they went, like the really bad stuff. They had bad materials in their home, should we say. Anyway, yeah. So this guy was not about God as far as I was concerned. Not that he was a terrible guy, but there wasn't anything holy there, that's for sure. And the boys were not holy. They were not holy. So I wasn't impressed as far as a connection to like what's supposed to be of the heavenly sort. So I did have some, experience, but not a great deal. But most of it was from my reading myself, and yes, the book of James was the main one that impressed me the most, although it wasn't James 1:5 like Joseph Smith. That was more like James 2, the faith and works and stuff like that. Then learning to control what you had to say, like your tongue is like the rudder of a ship, it said. And I thought, I got to try to not cuss so much. So I read a lot of things in there, and I studied on my own. It wasn't like, some kid and my mom make me go to church or something. It was the opposite. And so I was studying. Anyway, so I used to go to the Birch meetings, like Friday nights. Yep. And that's what I did. Wasn't out partying. Anyway, so that's kind of how my spiritual thing got going. And then after a while, hey, somebody from the Birch meetings was Mormon, and my mom went to this thing. So Anyway, she went there, and there was other manipulated spiritual experiences. Basically, a guy that she knew also from the same kind of vitamin MLM scene, but wasn't in her group. Happened to be a 70 from the church, and he was. When I say 70, it's like in those days everybody was a 70. It wasn't like you didn't have to be a general authority. So that means your calling is like missionary, like always. You're stuck. You're a missionary. You're going to be in the Gospel Essentials class for life. It's a life sentence. So that's anyway. This guy was one of those guys, I guess. So he like was hiding in the shadows or some crap like that when she left. He goes, "So how did you feel about it?" Whatever. So she said, "Oh, it's pretty interesting actually." I was like, interested because of the food storage and stuff or whatever, maybe. So he said, "Well, you want to learn more?" The golden question. So next thing we know is those guys show up at the house to teach us, a couple of 70s, and I could see light around one of them. He had a light around him, and I was like, "Whoa! I've never seen light around somebody before," but he had light around him, and they were basically what they had to say really kind of answered a lot of concerns that I had. I'd written a letter to Billy Graham, but not sent it with questions that I had, from watching him on television and so forth. I mean, like I said, I was seriously investigating, Christian religion, and there was a presence, and it all just seemed like it was flowing with truth when they had the Planet Salvation discussion and the Joseph Smith discussions. I still remember those now to this day. So I would say that was a spiritual experience. It wasn't a super intense kind of thing, but it was like the Joseph Smith saying, we feel pure intelligence flowing into you, that kind of a thing. Plus I could see the light around this dude, and I'd never seen light around anybody. There was a glow. And so after they split, after they left, I asked my mom, I said, "Hey, did you notice anything like unusual tonight?" She said, "Yeah." And actually I remember, I know I asked her, but I'm also going off of knowing that I've listened to her tell other people, the exact words or whatever. But how I approached her with this, because basically I wanted to not give her. I didn't want to say, "Hey, here's what I had," and have her just say, "Yeah, that happened," or "No, it didn't." I wanted her to independently identify if she had had any sort of spiritual awareness. And she said, "Yeah, I did see something. Something did go on." I said, "What was it?" She goes, "I saw a light." And I said, "Which one was it around?" And she identified the same guy. And I was like, "Whoa." I said, "Yeah, well, that's like I think she said that my words were, 'I wondered if you saw it too.'" So, people can try and explain that away as they will. So we had two different people that saw a light around a guy. And at any rate, so we basically did, like whatever discussions and stuff for like a year and a half or something. I'm not sure. I don't remember. I know, of course, they asked if we want to be baptized, but we weren't hopping on the baptism train. And maybe I was waiting for mom or something to do it. I don't know. But we started going to church and that sort of a thing. And at any rate, along those periods of time, also I got involved with what you might call the paranormal or mind control. This was actually called mind control. We were involved with other success motivation things. Well, there's one called Success Motivation Institute. There's another thing called Born to Be Great. It's all about trying to optimize, kind of things like Tony Robbins, I mean, in some degree, just basically something trying to, use inspiration, motivation. Maybe it was more like it went from like Dennis Waitley kind of stuff to really like technology. And then we got into this other thing that actually had mind control in the name of the business. So we had these like couple weekends of seminars, and they were held at our house. So you got a group, there's us, and I think there were, some other people. I know there were some other people there, but there wasn't like a large amount of people. There's like a few other people. And so one of them was like a trainer or something, and a couple others, I'm not sure what, I had the impression that they were not new to this. So, you start off learning like self-hypnosis, relaxation techniques, and that kind of thing. And then you learn different techniques. And so we got to the point, it was only like in a couple weekends, but it was like, a fair amount of time. So, I learned how to do self-hypnosis and this kind of stuff. So where you could, relaxation. It's interesting. You see Spencer Kimball actually say that he did things like that too. And he'd say, "Well, I didn't have enough time to rest, so I'd go into these relaxation states and stuff." So, you learn how to control your brain wave, stuff, go into the alpha mode rather than the beta. where you are now as far as the speed of brain waves or whatever. And people to do that like when they're meditating. So you learn visualization techniques and various things. And so I try to combine this with psycho-cybernetics. I was reading psychology stuff back then too. I'm not Freudian crap, but I mean like learning how to do things with your subconscious mind and try to optimize your life and all that sort of a thing. And another book I read back then was like, what was it? So I was a young teenager. What was it? Handbook to Higher Consciousness, and then Psycho-Cybernetics by Maxwell Maltz. So I did visualization things, and they worked. And I read the experiments there. Try to so you can improve your performance in various things, sports or giving a speech or whatever you're trying to do, because you visualize it and experience it basically. And if you do it in a relaxation mode, basically under created self-hypnosis, where you go into your space there, it can be a lot more powerful. So we got to the point where we did things like I could say I did what sounds like it was remote viewing. We were like a week away from doing astral projection, but this is like next to astral projection practically, except for I wasn't out of body, but we got to the point where they give you a name, somebody else gives you a name, somebody you don't know, and maybe they could have been BSing us, but I saw the guy. I was viewing him like on a screen when in my relaxation mode. Boom, he appeared. I saw him. I told them, where he lived. Whether he's living on a golf course. I watched him. He had a little bar in the house. He was alcoholic and everything I described. They said yes, yes, but I don't know the guy. Maybe these people were BSing me. Could have been, but I saw it, and in my mind's eye, eyes closed, relaxation state, viewing like kind of like a dream, except for there it is, and you're seeing it. At any rate, we got to the point where we did all different things, and so you go in through your body mentally, and I've done that and other stuff too, and I heard the brethren talking trash about that kind of a thing, or they actually didn't say what it was, but people diagnosing their bodies or other people's, by basically going in mentally or spiritually, and you can see in the body and see where the problems are, or feel it if it was in your own. I mean, you're when you're going through this hypnotic stuff, you're looking and you say, oh, your shin, and then you'll have these memories flood back about when you hurt your shin or something. I mean, there's memories that seem to be attached to areas of your body. Anyway, so somehow the idea of healing came up, and I don't know if it already came up, but I think actually it all probably started when these birds started dying in mass around our home, and we didn't know why. They're just these sparrows mostly. They're maybe they're all sparrows, and they're dying. Just they're flapping their wings and flopping around and all this kind of stuff. And I thought maybe I can heal them. And so I remember it was like the first time, and I guess we discussed a lot of these metaphysical techniques, and basically you like imagine and concentrate until it happens. And so I started trying that. And anyway, this first bird, and so I imagined healing the bird. Basically, I imagined like beaming green healing power light. This sounds pretty metaphysical, doesn't it? Into the bird with my left hand. So I was like kneeling next to the bird because it's down there on the ground and like rolling around and stuff, right? And so I'm not touching it, but I'm focusing this energy, okay? And with my right hand, I'm focusing bringing out toxins. Blue light coming to my right hand, and then I focused that going into the wall of dividers from the neighbors afterwards, to like detoxify myself. That's the process, think of it as strange or whatever, but I was focusing energy going into the bird with my left hand as the healing hand. And at any rate, I think in my mind, I've got like the number 40, 45 minutes or something. I don't know if I was wearing a watch, but it took a time. Anyway, the bird seemed to recover and then just flew away. And there were birds like all around dying, okay? And if I didn't, anyway, so I started doing it more and more and more. And it's like faster and faster and faster, like I could heal these birds. And so I'd like say a prayer, because this is when we were getting involved with the church. We were already involved. I don't know if I was, baptized yet or whatever. It was about the time I got baptized, I think. So I was very concerned at where this power was coming from because it was evident. And I was like, okay, I'm not really believing that this is all coming from me. So it happened faster and faster and faster. And if I would not heal a bird, if I didn't go to the bird, they would die. And if I did, they would be healed. And the process was faster and faster and faster. I mean, we had like maybe multiple buckets of these birds. And, it was ridiculous. We tried to find out what the hell was going on. I think we called the newspaper, and we had to whatever the city people or So, what did you do? Like spray the trees or something? I'm pretty sure. It was probably my neighbor put out rat poison because he was a jerk. He used to put out bird seed and then shoot the birds in his lawn with a BB gun from inside the house. An adult. Anyway, maybe I suspect he probably threw out rat poison or something for the birds. Poison bird food or something. So, I don't know what happened, honestly. The healing started happening. So then I started doing healings, and my family, every time anybody got a headache, they'd come to me and boom, I'd get rid of their headache. And, so I did stuff for myself and I did stuff for them and the animals. So, animals, they can't fake it, right? People, family members. So at any rate, I started getting really spooked about where the hell this power was coming from. Because I'd pray, because I was starting to believe in God, and I was saying, don't let this come from any evil source and stuff. But we got, like in more into the church, and I'm like, okay, well, like you're supposed to like have the priesthood to do this kind of stuff. So I said, you know what, I'm quitting. So it's like the next time somebody came when they had a headache and wanted me to take away their headache and heal them, I said, no, I decided I'm not doing that stuff anymore. So so much for being, the teenage faith healer. And what else? Other strange experiences. Somewhere with my brother, and I was just throwing this in for a spiritual experience for being, just maybe I shouldn't even throw it in there. I was at a lower level, in height because of where we were, and he went up to the road. We'd been riding a motorcycle, two of us, and he went up to make sure all was clear, make sure no cars were coming because I couldn't see what I was doing. I was have to rev it and basically fly up on the road. So he looks down at me like everything's cool after he looked around. So I revved the motorcycle and revved it and flew up onto the road and it stalled. And there I'm like in the middle of the road, right? And then I hear the screeching of tires. I'm like, what? So I looked, and this car, going at a high rate of speed, white smoke pouring up in the back of the tires, and it's like a black Monte Carlo or something. It's coming at me, and it's not looking good. I'm perpendicular to the road, and this thing is going to mow me down. And I'm sitting on the motorcycle, and there isn't time to do anything really. And instead of having like some kind of adrenaline rush or freak out fear, suddenly this presence came around me that was like totally calm. And I moved out. I was like tried to pivot the motorcycle like it was a bicycle or something. It's a motorcycle, okay? And I wasn't like Hulk Hogan, and I didn't have a burst of strength or adrenaline or anything. And I tried to replicate this, and it was impossible because my leg was in the way. There's no way to go like a 90-degree pivot off the back tire of a motorcycle or something and get out of the way. But it happened. I was basically moved out of the way while I was on the motorcycle, out of the way of the car, and it slid past me. And the people, I lined up with a back window, and there's some girl in there, and like her mouth was open, and like jaw dropped out. It was dead silence. None of them said anything. It was complete silence. Everybody was like in complete shock. I don't know what they saw, but I was in their way, and then I wasn't. And I was in their way, and I'm like, what the hell happened? What happened? And their window was down. I just looked at the girl, and I just said, oh my God. That's what I said. I know it sounds blasphemous, but it wasn't like I was trying to say it frivolously. It's like, what happened? Did God do this? What did this? What moved me out of the way? So I tried to figure out how in the hell the motorcycle did that, because it's completely impossible. Even if I was super strong, I couldn't have done it, but it happened. So that was an instance where, I was moved out of the way by something other than me. And it's not the only time that things happen where the physical world was affected by some unseen force. Then I asked my brother, hey, so, your whole purpose in life right here was to make sure there was not a car coming and communicate that to me effectively. What the hell happened? And he's like, I couldn't talk. I'm like, you couldn't talk? He said, no, I tried to open my mouth and I couldn't, words wouldn't come out. So I had to ask myself, why the hell did this happen? What worked upon him so that he could not speak, and what worked upon the motorcycle and me to move me out of the way and to bring that feeling of calm instead of adrenaline rush, freak out, you're going to be killed. But I was just moved out of the way. So, okay, once again, yeah, so that's a credibility story. If you don't know me, it doesn't mean anything to you. But for me, I I had to realize that something intervened in that. And I also had to think, well, why it was like the devil keeping my brother's mouth shut and God saving me? I mean, what's going on here with this interaction? So those are some of the spiritual, metaphysical things. A couple of things that occurred in my life at that time. Anyway, we wound up getting baptized and joined the church, and whatever. Um, where do I want to go with it from here? Uh, After a while, after not that long, really, people started diverging in their behavior. I don't know if I remember all the details. I think my mom kind of might have gone a little inactive during that some period of time. I'm not sure, but uh, I don't know. Word of Wisdom said I was reading myself. I was alone again, reading by myself, and I was reading section 89, and said that mild drinks of barley were recommended. It's obviously beer. Anyway, I guess near beer is approved. It's got low enough alcohol content. Approved. Well, of course, the Word of Wisdom wasn't any kind of a commandment in the first place. It was like in the 1900s when they decided to attach it, doing it to a temple recommend. All the previously the brethren obviously drank. If you read their diaries and stuff, Joseph Smith, Brigham Young, all the boys are drinkers. Well, anyway, so I figured, okay, whiskey, strong drink, mild drink of barley's beer. So we wound up kind of getting away from the whole Word of Wisdom thing eventually for a while there, and diverged, I would say. And during that time, we'd always listened to music, although I tried to stay away from anything like the Beatles and so forth. After I, learned about Tavistock and the messages that were being taught and so forth, even though my friends listened to it, it's not like they were super current or anything, but my friends were into that. But started listening to, Led Zeppelin and things like that, and at any rate, to relate another spiritual experience, so we were, kind of not going to church then for a while, and it seemed like the influences of the things that were from the dark side were permeating our lives with the whole music thing and that kind of stuff. So I walked into my room, and I had, our music was, like I said, not inspired from anything that I would feel good about. Probably. And suddenly I had this thought to emulate what I saw on an album cover, which, involves, satanic gestures. Even though they're popularized, well, in some manners of being acceptable in society with other names, depending on how you do things. And I just emulated this album cover when I walked into my room, and it's like this power came through me, unbelievable. I mean, it just, and then I wasn't alone, and the lamp was like, on a chain on the ceiling. I had this lamp, and it started like swinging around and stuff, and like every time I went into my room, or I don't know if it was every time this happened for a while. It was just unbelievable what was going on. It's indescribable, the power that was there. I felt like I could, lift 500 pounds or something. I didn't try to lift 500 pounds, but the power that was in me was incredible ever since I did that. And there was a presence, and it was not pleasant at all. It was not good, and there was a tension in it, but the power was unbelievable. So anyway, there were some bad things happening as far as that goes, and things really came to a head. And I don't think I want to get into all the details, but I prayed. I went outside for some reason and prayed. I knelt down and prayed for deliverance from this horrible presence that had been with me for like a few days at that point, and bad things were happening. It was not good. And boom, it was gone. During the prayer, that the presence left, that the whole thing left, and I was like limp, like limp, like exhausted, like after you like run the mile or something and you're like exhausted. It was like that. And I that super strong but horrible energy was gone, and I was like left unto myself. Those are the words that I would have used to describe it. In between that time, there had been other experiences which were of a spiritual nature, dramatic. I had other dramatic things happen in my room. I had one occasion where it was, I don't like sharing this kind of stuff because people like to condemn people for this kind of stuff, but I mean, it was bad. And I was not alone. And I couldn't even speak. I tried to yell for help, and a presence came into my room. It was night, but things got so completely dark, and this thick presence was there. And I basically was thrown down on my bed, and I tried to yell, and I couldn't. And I was scared, and I was, fairly, I wasn't like a sissy, okay? And I played sports and all that kind of stuff, and I was I was I was not alone, and I was scared. I tried to yell because I noticed this presence enter the room after I'd had certain dreams that I was contemplating different things, and um, like word of wisdom related in the dreams. And then I woke up and I'm sitting there thinking about it, and then the presence came, the same kind of presence that came that other evening when the boys left, and it pinned me down, and I tried to scream and I couldn't. I couldn't move my arms, couldn't do anything. And then a voice spoke and it said, "If you do what you thought of, you'll deliver yourself to the powers that hold you now." And then it was gone. The presence left the room, and I was like, "Wow, I can move, I can do anything." And I'm like, well, I guess I don't need to, try to scream and ask mom, help, like, I don't know. Not like she could have done anything, but what do? You're a child, you're freaking out. And at any rate, so it was gone. So I went back to sleep. So that was similar to the horrible presence that came, that other, in those other instances. And so over my life, I've had multiple instances where a presence similar to that has happened, and I wasn't alone, and other people had horrendous experiences with it. I mean, like the hair stands up on your arm, like vertically. People can hardly even talk. The thickness comes in so badly. I had, one of the family members was being buffeted by a presence, a demon, we called it, a spirit, whatever. And the experiences, I mean, we were talking about it, and I mean, what happened was just if you're not involved with witchcraft, magic, the occult, you have no clue probably about this stuff. It's like, I don't watch those kind of shows on television, but I mean, I've seen like, previews to like Poltergeist or something, and yeah, there have been times when things, physical objects were affected, but in these cases, I mean, I was with somebody. I mean, I like tried, use the priesthood ideas and things like that, and at any rate, so so I believe in the name of Jesus Christ, and it's so intense I can't even begin to explain it. And when you're not the only one, and it just it enters the presence, and if you're with people that have had that happen, like I said, if it's not part of your world, you think it's something from Disney, but it's not. So what was I going to say? So so I had experiences, yeah. Stuff with the church, like I said, I had definitely experiences when the missionaries were there. They weren't earth-shattering, and the whole baptism and confirmation thing was actually not at all a spiritual experience, to be honest. It was rather disappointing because I was really kind of hoping to have a spiritual experience, especially things I read about Joseph Smith and things like that, and Oliver Cowdery. That didn't happen. At any rate, things were kind of lackluster as far as the church experience goes for a while there. So anyway, there came a point where I said, I've got to go back to church. This is, that was around the time, or a little, not too far from that time, that horrifying experience happened there with the, I emulated a rock star and found that I was not alone, and the energy that entered me was horrendous. So anyway, that was really terrible, and then anyway, that ended when I had that kneeling prayer outside, There's so many experiences. I mean, outside is where I used to read, like, scriptures, or a book called Added Upon. And when I actually kind of envisioned something, it's not like Martin Harris. I don't know. Seeing things with your spiritual eye. I mean, I didn't like hallucinate something. I just saw in my mind's eye certain very important things regarding relationships and so forth. So that whole Saturday's Warrior theme was kind of a big deal with us. The premortal life and meeting up with your, loved ones from the premortal existence became a very important theme to me, and has been a big deal in my life. So, okay, so there we are. And anyway, I started going to well, there were various experiences. My mom was bringing guys around from the priesthood to try to talk to us, and because we were like not into the church thing at all, and you know, music was kind of on the satanic side sometimes, and there was stuff going on. So one of the brethren that I rather liked, and who had also he had told me that his experience was when he was investigating the church, he heard like a bunch of voices together, like a chorus of his relatives from the other side or something, say it's true. That was his big experience with joining the church. He also told me about how something blew off a truck in front of him. It was like some big object that would have smashed his car and killed him, and he said he watched it just vaporize in front of him. So, and he said he could like raise the dead or something. I mean, like an emergency situation, not somebody who was like 4 days dead, but he was involved with stuff where we did like priesthood blessings. Some of them seemed kind of somewhat dramatic, I guess. But anyhow, he said, "Why don't you go to school?" So I started going to school, college. I was just barely out of high school. I mean, the stuff had gotten really super gnarly with the spiritual stuff, and so I said, "Okay," and I'm gonna I don't know. I'm gonna make some changes here, and so I started going to school, and I had to take a bus. It was kind of a long trip, and anyway, at the I was watching a girl that I didn't really talk to much, but she was kind of a friend with a friend that I knew from school, a girl from school that I didn't really went anywhere with her, but I just she like sat in the desk in front of me a couple times or something, so we're kind of friendly. And they started kind of talking to me a little bit, paying some attention to me. But anyway, I was watching her walk up on the bus, and she was ahead of me in the bus line, in college. And an unseen being spoke to me and said, "If you keep my commandments, she's yours." And I was like, "What?" That was like out of the blue, It's not like I heard like, unseen people all the time at all, but just like a couple critical times in life, and actually maybe that I won't. So that wasn't like a normal thing, right? I'm like, what the? So anyway, sure enough, I mean, maybe like we sat on the bus next to her, and the next to her friend another time. We just talked and stuff. Anyway, so I wasn't living at home, and I was living with these people. The dad was a Freemason of these people, and he talked about being a warlock sometimes. And his daughter supposedly practiced witchcraft. She was visiting. She lived out of the country now and had children, but was visiting her parents. And so yeah. So anyway, there we are, and like my brother was over, and we were like hanging out in the backyard, and, working on some stuff. And anyways, girls show up. Actually, like a girl that had been my girlfriend and her friends showed up. They just said, "Oh, we were just out jogging." Like they lived like 3 miles away. I'm like, "You're just out jogging?" And anyway, so we said hi to them, talked to them for a few minutes, and then these other girls show up, who I'm talking about, that the voice said that she's yours if you keep my commandments, and she was also the one at the MYF who was a foot taller than me, but now she was only about exactly the same probably. So they show up. And they're like, "Hey, yeah, we just came over to rescue you. It's Friday night, and we know your car isn't working stuff because you told us that." I'm like, "Okay." "How did you know where I live?" I don't know. And so it's like me and my brother, and they're like, "Okay, well, you guys like, well, let's go hang out or something." So okay, so we go get in the car, and we weren't like keeping the word of wisdom quite yet. So well, anyway, they open the door, and it's like, so the other girl opens the door into the back seat and holds it open or something. Like for me, it's like I realized that I was being given a choice. here, that this was going to be a paired up date thing, not just a group affair. And I was like, well, I guess I got to make a choice, and apparently she's here looking for me, but that's not the choice that I want to make, so I might as well straighten this up now rather than later. So I got in the front seat with the girl that I had been told was mine if I kept the commandments. And I hadn't told this to anybody. So anyway, evidently she was very surprised. I don't know if I want to get into the rest of what I... So they said, oh, let's get some beer. Let's get a 6-pack. We'll go out and take a cruise or something, go to the park, I don't know, whatever. So I said, okay, we'll go in the house and get, the girl who's a little bit older and married and visiting, because I was living at these people's house. And so we got her, and she said, yeah, sure, So we went to like a gas station that, like an AM, PM, so, beer and stuff. And so she went in and bought some beer, and then everybody else decided they wanted to go to the bathroom, except for me and her, the married girl. And we'd hung out a little bit, listen to some music or whatever, but I mean, she's married. I'm not gonna, I'm not the, I'm not into that whole, I just thought we were friends, Anyway, she's like, I can't believe you're going out with this girl and stuff. I was imagining you and me, on the spring break time, and we were gonna go hang out at your dad's house. And I'm like, what? Are you out of your mind? You're married, and I'm not, and no, sorry, and I'm not into that, and I'm trying to do some stuff right for my church, even if I'm still drinking beer. So that was really weird. So they came back, and she's like, well, I feel like a fifth wheel, and take me back to the house. So everybody's like, okay, whatever. And so yeah, we just went to the park and stuff, I think, mostly, and actually we climbed trees. Yeah, it's not like people got wasted in a 6-pack with 4 people or something, but it was all harmless. But anyway, that turned into a relationship where marriage resulted, and I came back to church during that time and was very careful to live the more important commandments, basically. And I quit drinking after a very short time, I suppose. Wasn't doing any kind of word of wisdom violation stuff after 3 months maybe. So I was, so anyway, so she started coming to church with me, and next thing you know, not next thing you know, but she was, a few months later, she had the lessons, and they ordained me as a priest. I baptized her, and a few months later we were married, and yeah, so about 9 months after that, we were going to the temple. And so we were sitting in bed the night before we go to the temple, and there we are, just sitting there. She's reading or something. They were both reading, I don't know, but we were sitting in our bed, and she was 6 months pregnant or something, I don't know. We're sitting there in bed, and all of a sudden, wham, I'm attacked by a by an unseen being, and I can hardly even talk, and I was almost in convulsions. And she looks over at me. She just wasn't the most compassionate person. However, got involved with her is beyond this world. So anyway, she's like, what the hell's wrong with you? It's like, don't disturb me while you're dying there. So this is the attitude. And it came to my mind, so I rolled off the bed onto my knees and tried to pray. And in my mind I was trying to pray. My mouth was I couldn't even talk, and I could feel this thing trying to get in, in the center, where solar plexus is, where they try to, if you talk to people in the occult, you'll probably know something about this. Anyway, I've talked to other people that have had issues with demons and things. So I wasn't having anything like this, nothing for a year probably with any kind of thing like that, and usually it's when you're half asleep, but I was wide awake, and light was on, we're reading, and it came into my mind, use the priesthood. This is the night before the temple, okay? This is 6 hours before we're leaving, 7 hours, and I don't know where it came into my mind, but I raised my hand to the square as if, like people do in a baptism or in an exorcism, or where you learn things like that. and I'd never seen it except for baptism. So I don't know where this came from. And so I tried to utter words, and they were probably uh, like uh, unintelligible, basically. I could hardly even speak. And as soon as I did, boom, the presence left. And I was like, whoa. And she's like, what the hell was wrong with you? Like she could give a crap, Yeah. Anyway, so we went to the temple the next day. And so that experience, of course, for me was like, okay, well, the devil was trying to get you before you went to the temple. Um, but fortunately, have the Melchizedek priesthood and cast the demons away. And so no more problems like that. So that was just how weird is that? Okay, so we did the whole temple thing, and of course that's pretty weird because weird stuff happens at the temple. But anyway, or did back then. And all right, so a few months later, I'm called to be a stake missionary, and there we are, teaching some people that I actually knew, because like my mom invited him to have the missionary lessons, and she'd like had some kind of experience with the lady, like she gave her marvelous work on a wonder, but I tried like about 8 times to get her to take the lessons, I heard, or something. I don't know. Anyway, so we went there. It was all really kind of strange first time. Like the other missionary guy, I was like pretty new at it, and he said, "Yeah, let's watch John Dehlin." And I'm like, "Are you kidding me?" So anyway, that's like everybody set them at ease or something. They figured we were harmless. So, um, maybe a couple of discussions later or something. I can't say how many times we've been there. So we were like this upper room in their house, and it's like a family room upstairs. And there we are, and we're just teaching them, right? Just normal, given the concepts, and I was given a concept, uh, and there we were, and then I was told, testify in the name of Jesus Christ, and I'm like, what? That seems kind of weird, Well, it's not like this stuff happens all the time, but it's like out of the blue, just like that, you keep my commandments and she's yours, thing. So I'm like, okay, well, that's got to be the Holy Ghost or something, right? But that'd be really corny. I'm like right in the middle of this thing, and like if we were finishing the lesson, that would be cool, but we're right in the middle of it, and I'm in the middle of my concept, and it's the other guy's turn, and, I'm not all into that. But, so I keep going, and then I was told again, very explicitly, testify in the name of Jesus Christ. And so, like I did. I said, okay, well, I was about ready to wind up my concept right then, and so I did. I said, I testify in the name of Jesus Christ. And as soon as I did, isn't that weird? I feel like you have to say it fast. In Jesus Christ. Anyway, but I didn't. I mean, I said anyway. I said the words Jesus Christ, and that it was like magic words. It was like, boom. This presence enters the room like super, super strong, and there's like a light, and you could see it. It's like everything was glowing. It's not like things were glowing. It was like we will now enter the terrestrial world. It's like things like got brighter, and this presence was just, it was overwhelming, but it was totally positive, totally. Actually, I'd had this experience before, and I haven't mentioned it. Just phenomenal, and that's probably what like Jedi was talking about. He's like, you totally know, yeah, because it's overwhelming, and it was visible. And so it's the father and the mother and 3 children, and mom and the children are like on the couch or something. And dad's like in front of us directly in the easy chair. So I'm like looking more at him, and he just starts instantly just tripping completely. He's just blown away. He's like looking up at the ceiling, looking all around. He's like has his palms up. And he goes, what is this, man? What is going on? What is this? This is he was in he he was just blown away by the presence that was immediately there. Okay, it was a presence. I just spoke the words. It wasn't like I was telling some marvelous story of something amazing that happened. We're just giving this whatever concept it was. It's like Mr. Brown, will you read this scripture, or whatever, and then boom, and so he was completely blown away by what happened. I imagine that the other family members experienced this. I don't know how much they experienced it, but I saw his reaction, and he asked me what the hell is going on here. He didn't say hell, but he was just looking all around saying, my God, what is this? And I said, that's the Holy Spirit testifying to the truth of our message. Because that's what came to me to say. That just came into my mind. I wasn't like told what to say like I was, but this was, like I said, it's like magic words. It's just boom. So that was an experience that multiple people had. And I talked about it afterwards when after we left with the other missionary guy and the full-time elder, and you know it didn't seem like he was as impressed with it, but he wasn't denying it at all either. It's just that he acknowledged it. I would say he acknowledged it. It's just like, I don't know, he wasn't like going, "Wow, this was super gnarly," or at least I don't remember him doing that. I maybe it was. I really don't know, but I know I really had a huge experience, and I know that the dad did, and I know that the elder recognized it, and I don't know how can you measure someone else's intensity, but the other guy, maybe for him he'd had some other experience like that. I don't know, but I mean, we talked about it, and he was definitely wasn't acting like it didn't happen, or he acknowledged it. So um, I don't want to say, yeah, mom had the same experience the mom or the children did, because I don't actually remember them, talking about it. But they were all baptized very quickly, so I mean, there was like no disagreement there. Something really wild happened, and I've also heard about it from other people later. Actually, I heard it from my mom. I heard her telling someone else, and I'd never talked about it with her. And she said, "Yeah, my friend, blah blah blah," and said that they said they had a very strong spiritual experience, but they didn't share what it was. Like maybe it was too sacred or something, kind of a thing. Anyway, so Jedi, if you're hearing this, you probably aren't. You're never listening to anything anyway, and this is like 10 times longer than usual. So well, maybe not 10 times, but so yeah, I know what it's like. However, so and I had other experience. I had another experience like this, except for physical objects were acted upon. Um, yeah, I really don't want to get into the details of that because it just sounds um, too much like it's out of a movie or something. But it happened, and there was not an earthquake because I checked, and some things that should have been affected by an earthquake, other than um, object that I was very well aware of, that I would were not affected, and some things were affected drastically during a prayer, during an experience where a light came into the room, and my heart basically started to pound like it felt like I was going to have a heart attack. It happened while I was having I was praying, and had read like the entire the entire book was all the chapters of the Book of Moses. I had read during the night and was trying to get closer to God and stuff, and was praying for strength to make good choices. And then the same presence entered the room, except for something physical happened, with furniture that was like like impossible, and nothing like on my bookcase with the books and trophies and all that stuff attached to the wall were affected, so there was not an earthquake occurring. So multiple things were happening at the same time, multiple things. A light, an incredible presence. The feeling was unbelievable, and my heart. I was afraid I might have a heart attack, and this was just happening it suddenly happened while I was praying, and this presence entered the room, which filled every particle, every 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 bit of the room, every tiny part. It was like it was glowing with intelligence and a presence around me and inside me. It was unbelievable, and that's what happened in those people's house too. And like I said, I wasn't the only one that noticed it. And then it seemed like maybe there was an area that there was more light than others. So I actually thought that there was going to be an appearance of an angel. I was hoping, because it seemed like the presence was so strong. It was just unbelievable. The feelings of security, love, truth, all kinds of stuff. And I actually had stuff come to my mind that clarified some thoughts that I had about the gospel stuff. But the presence that was there was phenomenal. And things happened that were like obviously intended for me to say that there's no way that I could ever say that it didn't happen, because stuff happened that was like not possible by anyway, it's like out of the movies kind of stuff, except for good instead of evil feeling presence. Same room that the bad stuff had happened in. Anyway, yeah. So, obviously, I had what was called a testimony. Obviously, there were spiritual influences there, and I read a lot of scripture. So, in the years subsequent to that, I did a lot of study. I probably studied a lot more than most people. We read a lot of LDS books. By church leaders, guys are supposed to be apostles and prophets and those kind of things. Um, I don't want to brag about all the books I read, but various books from the Pratt brothers and multiple 5 or 6 from Bruce McConkie. New Testament doctrinal commentary or whatever, doctrinal New Testament commentary, Mortal Messiah, Son of Millennial Messiah, obviously Mormon Doctrine. Kinds of like Joseph Fielding Smith stuff. A lot of Joseph Smith's material, Brigham Young's talks, and all that kind of stuff, and a lot of Skousen stuff. And I was pretty, Gerald Lund. I was really trying to be super spiritual and really trying to do the right thing, and trying. Temple was not a short distance, and I'd fast all the way. I did a lot of things to really try, and like state conferences. There were times where I'd feel the spirit at church. Actually, there were a couple of times when I had the heart start pounding, but not to where I felt like I was going to have a heart attack or something. But so I'd get up. That was like in testimony meeting and so forth. So yeah, I had experiences that were very spiritual, and I was very devoted. Tried very hard. I was like really good at keeping the Sabbath day. We'd watch, church videos or whatever to, try to make sure we didn't do anything that would break the Sabbath. And, raising children, trying to do the best you can and make their day as tolerable as. Isn't that terrible that Sunday has to be tolerable, in church instead of like a good thing? I try to make it as good as we could, but how many times can you watch, it all started with that or the mailbox, I mean. Sometimes we take a walk and go see family members or whatever, but really tried to, read a lot of stuff and just tried to do everything right. Tried really hard to do everything right. And life was a disaster. Yeah, patriarchal blessing, nothing but lies. I kept my end of it. I sure did. And I had, had specific directions, which I followed, about studying things and, so forth, but all the promises for good things, everything got screwed up. Yeah. Hey, why don't we have family home evening? Hey, why don't you go to hell? I'm going to watch The Simpsons. That when things were winding up, that was a typical sort of thing. So yeah, I learned to believe in opposition in all things. I was married to it. And life was difficult, but I really did try very, very hard to make everything possible, do everything possible to bring salvation, to family members, and try to do my best in my callings, all that kind of thing. But I had experiences along the way that woke me up to things that were not consistent. So I mentioned that so I did a lot of study actually about history and NGOs, non-government organizations like Council on Foreign Relations, Trilaterals group and stuff. And what I learned as I went deeper is that the people who organize these groups generally belong to secretive or secret societies, including Freemasonry. That's a secretive society. They have secrets. They're not secret. And I learned about the French Revolution. I the Jacobin clubs, and the Adam Weishaupt's group, which became later known as the Illuminati. And, I read more and more things later about Freemasonry, and Albert Pike talks about, the Illuminati and the 3 world wars that would be engineered, and that he was all for, it was within Freemasonry that he was talking about this. He wasn't mentioning the Illuminati in that particular instance. Anyway, so I learned about, his saying that Lucifer was God, and things that didn't work right, because I knew that Joseph Smith was a Freemason. And when I learned that, right before going to the temple, or actually, somewhere along there, I learned it, and I asked the bishop, and he said, yeah, Joseph Smith was a Mason, This bishop was a good guy. He was really straight, with me. He was a good guy. Um, but I don't know how much I knew back then, but I wasn't comfortable with the whole idea with a prophet of God being a Freemason. And the more I learned, of course, the whole Luciferian thing, and then their involvement, with every organization that was dedicated to creating a world government through subversive means and engineering wars that cost many people's lives, seemed to involve Freemasonry. And as we saw, that many of the presidents of the United States were Freemasons, and many people involved with the revolution were. And as I'd read the Book of Mormon, I noticed that the theme there being a manifest destiny theme, God, creating the United States and the Constitution and all this good kind of stuff, and the history being controlled by God, basically, in the Book of Mormon. And then I learned that basically things weren't really that way at all. Things were much different. A lot of people came over in slavery from Europe, and that's not what it says as they're coming out of captivity, but about half the colonists actually were, coming over as slaves. And whether you want to call them indentured servants or slaves, from what I've read, it wasn't any better. Maybe it was worse. And horrendous things going on. Things were not what we've been told in American history at all. And if I look at these guys that were involved, people like Benjamin Franklin, and he wasn't just in the Freemasons, but he was like in the Grand Orient Lodge, and he was in the Hellfire Club, and all kinds of really, satanic stuff. And the more you learn about these people, the more history isn't like what we learned in the Book of Mormon. And so anyway, I went back to visit, these folks lived very close by that I had lived with for a while, where the father was a Freemason. He was a nice guy, in a lot of ways, but he was kind of devious in some ways too. And he liked to drink. And so after I'd been to the temple, we were over there visiting, and he was rather intoxicated. And he came in contact with people who like to do funny handshakes. And so he was, sharing some handshakes from people that he wound up meeting from his work. And then he said, I'm not supposed to show you this one. And then he gives me a grip that I recognized. And I said, what is that? And he indicated that it was from Freemasonry. And he said he wasn't supposed to share that, but he was pretty wasted. And I was pretty freaked out. I was like, what the hell? So, yeah. I kept finding connections between the church and Freemasonry. Got all for the wedding reception and the wedding stuff, which was a backyard wedding. We got tried to get some stuff from the church, but something was going on that night at the church, so we couldn't get much. So we went to the Masonic temple, because this girl's daddy was a Freemason. And they gave us everything we wanted. And then they said, yeah, the Mormons used to meet here with us, we shared the building and stuff while they were building our chapel. I'm like, that's weird. During my life, I just came to a knowledge of various different associations within the church seeming to continue. And then, when the ordinances changed in the temple in 1990, people kind of wondered, well, what's that all about? I thought they weren't supposed to change. But, later on, I was reading something that had nothing to do with Mormonism, and it had to do, I was reading the secret society stuff, and I read that, Lord so-and-so in Britain had taken away the penalties, out of the Scottish Rite, I think it was, in 1986. And I'm like, so 4 years later, just out of coincidence, for hundreds of years, they dropped these penalties out of the Blue Lodge anyway, rights, and then Gordon B. Hinckley follows suit 4 years later. Is that like he's just trying to delay? Is he following suit because they're connected, but he didn't want to do it right away to make it too obvious? Yeah, well, anyway, so I began to learn things that didn't look right, and one of them was Freemasonry. The more I learned about it and the Luciferian aspects of it, the worship of Lucifer. Lucifer is our god, the Masonic religion. You had to, harness the seething energies of Lucifer. Reading some of these things from, Albert Pike, Manly Manly Palmer Hall and so forth, these 33rd degree Freemasons that were very influential occultists, we're talking about, you know, a Luciferian religion at the top of Freemasonry. The bottom levels are a peon, you don't know what the hell's going on. In fact, they said we intentionally deceive them about what things mean. Pike even says that. So the more you read, the more you're reading about magic and all kinds of stuff. And mystery religion things when you read Albert Pike. And I'm thinking, Joseph Smith brings us into the temple. Like 6 weeks after he's initiated as a Freemason. Why? You know, I thought we got the endowment from God, but he brings us in 6 or 7 weeks after he becomes a Freemason, and he's in Freemasonry, you know, it is run by people who have Lucifer as their god. In the LDS temple, Lucifer is, you know, same as Satan and the devil, even though, you know, it's really not what the Old Testament says, but Joseph Smith has him as Lucifer. So I'm like, okay, what is the prophet of God doing in it, or getting the temple ordinances or important aspects of them from a Freemason? And the more Freemasonry you read, the more you read things that are in the LDS Church. The language is, you know, the language of the priesthood, the, you know, Order of Melchizedek, or the stuff to do with a Relief Society, all kinds of stuff is out of Freemasonry. When you start read Royal Arch Freemasonry, start looking it up, start doing some reading, you'll notice a lot of terminology that's the same. Or if you start reading, you know, stuff about like how to consecrate a seer stone, right? When you're reading about magic that Joseph Smith used, let's consecrate. And you consecrate things or set it apart. And I'm like, consecrate, set apart. That sounds familiar. Or I was in priesthood, and the guy next to me had a book of, you know, it was like the Journal of Joseph Smith or something like that. You know, I had a lot of Joseph Smith books, but I didn't have that one. And so I just went through the back real quick, and I looked up Freemasonry, and boom, boom, and there it was. And so I read, you know, I went to the page, and Joseph Smith was saying, yeah, Brother Brigham and I went to the dedication of, you know, a Masonic temple today, and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, dedication of temples. There's too many things that are familiar here between witchcraft, Freemasonry, and terminology we hear in the church. And of course, you know, later, I didn't know that Joseph Smith used a seer stone at all until, you know, much later than that particular time. So I was like, various things were being shown to me. And so I was in the temple, you know, long after, you know, a lot of that stuff was taken out, right? I was in the temple, and I had one of these weird experiences again where somebody spoke to me that I couldn't see. And I'm sitting in the endowment, and a voice speaks to me, and it says, Google the 5 points of fellowship. I'm like, well, okay. So when I got home, I Googled it, and it was all, you know, about, you know, Legend of Hiram Abiff, and it was all Freemasonry. And so I thought, well, okay, well, they say that there's angels protecting the temple, so the devil can't get in to influence you. So who's telling me this stuff? Who's telling me to Google the 5 points of fellowship out of the blue? I mean, the 5 points of fellowship was gone in 1990, right? So all these things were like, I was being shown, basically things being revealed to me through the spiritual world, even if people were involved sometimes not, that things were not right. Things were not right at all. And I had experiences in the temple that were like, you know, a presence at a dedication was really intense, in a ceiling where someone's relatives close to me were involved, and I experienced something, and I related that, and I said, whoa. And I was told that it had been asked that it would be revealed to me what had happened and that they had accepted. And because the person who had done the research on it had spiritual experiences in locating the records and all that kind of stuff, facilitating this whole thing, had spiritual experiences, and I hadn't had them. And I was given this experience, and we looked across the altar. And, you know, she knew that I knew, and then afterwards we talked about it, and she said, what happened? And I said, yeah, I felt, you know, it was intense what happened when their name came up. And it was really something, you know, what I felt, their presence next to me, and their emotions and so forth. The whole thing was just, you know, really something. So I had other experiences in the baptism when my grandmother, I baptized, you know, probably my daughter in proxy for my grandmother, and it was a horrible experience. The feeling of a tremendous sorrow suddenly came over, and we were baptizing all kinds of, you know, people, names for people, and then her name came up, and boom, and this horrible sorrow came up. Same kind of feeling I'd had when my friend's
the Freemason's wife died, and when we were leaving, through the corridor out towards the front door from the chapel, it was a Catholic church where her funeral was held, the presence that was there was just this tremendous sorrow. She was a real nice lady. She died pretty young. And I had the same experience when we baptized my grandmother. And then as soon as it was over, then she was gone, and it was gone. We continued, but it was, but when she died, I was there too. And that was another major experience. I was there when she died. And when she died, this presence entered the room. I felt there were two individuals that entered the room. Couldn't see them. But the experience was intense. Suddenly, it was completely unexpected. And I felt there was a reunion occurring, and it lasted, 20, 30 seconds, and then boom, they were all gone. But, I held up a child and said, look, this is somebody you hadn't met. Never got to see, but now you can before you leave the room. And it was really an intense spiritual experience. So it was completely unexpected. I had another spiritual experience. We were in a park. It's like a Saturday in the park with family. And one child was very, very young, and then several others were ahead, walking ahead of the mother and her friend, and their children were, so the children were all like running a little bit ahead. And I laid down under a tree for a moment just because I was really tired and started to fall asleep, but I was awakened by a voice that said, "Go to your children lest they drown." And we were in another city, in a park I'd never been in, and I was completely unaware of any water. And I was told, "Go to your children lest they drown." And I was really tired. I thought, what? Why is a, spirit or guardian angel talking to me about water? And I don't know, I hate to say that, I kind of just paused there, but I was kind of waking up, I guess, and the voice spoke again and said, "Go to your children lest they drown." And there's like nobody there, visible. So I'm like, I better act on this now. So I ran and sprinted 100 yards or something. I could see where the children were, and I could see, where the moms were coming up, and they were pushing baby strollers and stuff, and it's lagging. And sure enough, there was a stream, and then it went down waterfall into a pond. As soon as I got there, my daughter slipped in the stream, fell down, was drowning. It was over her head. And I was able to dive in and get her. Say what you may, I had no idea about any of that. And I was awakened and told what to do and what was going to happen, and that happened. Anyway, I had other experiences that were pretty intense too. But like I said, through all these things, and I'm not being chronological at all here, really. I was trying to be at first, but I've really skipped around. I learned more and more things. Like I said, I learned a lot about, I studied Joseph Smith a lot, but I didn't know about the other guys' wives and all that stuff. Early on, we knew about polygamy, or knew what the church's story was on polygamy, which is basically you have to practice polygamy, and they're going to bring it back in the millennium. And, when I got married, at first at least, I was pretty in love, so I wasn't feeling good about that at all. I felt really threatened by the idea. The whole thing that the church presented was this idea that Joseph Smith was forced into taking additional wives, that God demanded it or he'd be damned. That's what we were taught. And that's pretty much what it says in section 132. It basically says, if you asked, it was revealed to you. Well, it wasn't revealed, it's not like I'm the one that asked, but basically the thought was there that, it's going to be brought back, and to enter your exaltation, you're going to have to, be willing to practice this. And I did not like the idea of it. But it was something that we talked about. My wife at the time brought it up, it's she's like, "I don't like the idea." And then it was later on, she's like, well, she goes, if that happened, she picks out this girl in the congregation that was single and kind of short and not super attractive. She goes, "I would be the first wife, so I would pick her to be another one of your wives." And I'm like, okay. Nice. And I'm not, this wasn't me bringing this up, and this wasn't my idea, and I'm not but it's something I think we were both uncomfortable about, the whole idea, because that was something, that was there. It was in the possible future, because we're thinking about, eternal life and all that stuff, and this is kind of like a monkey on your back or a monkey wrench in the whole scheme of your, happy eternal family thing is all of a sudden you got to like, add polygamous wives in the future at some undisclosed point when that gets revealed, or, of course, our patriarchal blessings were, they didn't say we're going to make it to the millennium. I hoped I would, just because they didn't want to die. But, yeah. So this was something that bothered me, and apparently it bothered the wife at the time. But then she was like getting used to it. Maybe it was because she was getting sick of me or something. But she obviously picked a girl who was not super attractive to say that. This is like I said, I didn't instigate this. This was like her bringing this up, and I'm like, oh, how interesting. Like, well, I don't know. She's not hideous, but I'm not really thrilled with the idea. But I'm getting that that's the part of the, whatever. She's just trying to make peace with the idea. I think actually, she wasn't all bad all the time, but things got worse. So, interesting. Nowadays, you're not taught maybe the same thing in church, but that's the kind of thing that we experienced. So I had a rather strange story. So anyway, we invited her mom to come to church, and so her mom, she probably went to the Methodist church occasionally, but so she came to church with us. So we were in Gospel Essentials class, since, she was like new to it. She had like a stroke and stuff, so she couldn't talk very much. She had a couple words, like she could say like call back at 5 and oh God. So this guy, he's a nice guy. I know him and his wife, they'd like, they had both been widower, so they had like 13 children together, and he was about like 70. He's a really super nice guy, and he's like a 70, and so he's teaching the Gospel Essentials class, and he'd been doing it for a long time. I might have told this story before. So, whatever the lesson was, anyway, he starts talking about celestial sex, and they said, that's just going to be really great. And he goes, because it's so good now, and he starts looking, and he says, right, to his wife, and he calls her by name, and he's like rubbing his hands together, and I'm like, oh God, what the hell is this guy doing here? And we just got the mother-in-law here, and anyway, she blasphemed. She said, oh God, and she never came back. I don't think she liked her husband that well. Maybe in multiple ways, I don't know. I'd heard some rumors. So, of course, I was, disappointed because I was trying to save her soul. So I guess, we figured, well, maybe she won't be held accountable because that guy really kind of said something that disturbed her and that he shouldn't have been saying. That, got to do the milk before meat thing, right? Yeah. So, line upon line, I learned things that didn't add up, and I read things in the Book of Mormon that were contradictory to the, Doctrine and Covenants, and more and more things where I saw things that were like impossible, like what's up with this, or it's what Doctrine and Covenants says you can't see God and live, right? But Joseph Smith did, unless you have the priesthood, and he didn't have the priesthood, in the first vision. Of course, I didn't know that the first vision was completely made up back then. I didn't know that they had all like 9 different versions of it. They contradicted himself, contradicted his family. There was no revivals in 1819 or so, which would have had to been because 1820. It was early 1820s when the vision would have happened, and they obviously don't have revivals in the snow. So there was, it was like 1823 when they started going to revivals, according to his brother, and none of it's historical. But I didn't know that back then. But gradually I began to learn things, one of my children said one day, hey, Dad, you realize that the DNA of the American Indians is from Siberia and not Israelite? That there are no Lamanites? I don't know when this was, like 2003 or something. I'm like, what? But I'd read, at least that the Israelites, the people in Israel, the Jews were not, they're probably like Khazars or something. They weren't like, there were Jews that were not Jews, like Jesus supposedly said. So they were probably Khazarian. I thought, well, okay, but maybe we don't have the right DNA to test against there, but that still doesn't explain if they're like all Eskimos, I didn't know that they had like the Mongoloid skull and, all that kind of stuff that basically says they're from the race from Mongolia. They're not from Israel. They're not Caucasian people. There are more differences than just your skin being, darker, that you got a nice tan and your reward for being wicked, according to, the curse that's in 2 Nephi chapter 5. it's the whole skin color thing is a little simplistic. There's a lot more to like an Asian race than just the characteristic of the skin being different colored. I didn't know that stuff, but there was things on the shelf until I ran into more and more things. But this whole thing with the Luciferian nature of the more I learned about the secret society networks and how the government's controlled and things like that, and the Luciferian aspect, there's just no way that the God who set up a free society was going to have his prophet get the endowment from a Luciferian or satanic source. It just makes zero sense. I grappled with that, and then I accidentally read about different things. I read Steve Benson, talking about trying to find out about evolution from Spencer Kimball, and he just got the runaround the whole time. And I'm like, why would the prophet give him the runaround? Why don't they actually, why do they, have science classes at BYU that contradict their religion classes? I mean, if all truth is circumscribed in one great whole, then where's the answer? Why don't these prophets ever give us any revelation or prophecy? Why do they just do contradictory stuff? So, like I said, I'd read a lot of, pretty, older church material and things. Then when I found out about Joseph Smith and the other guys' wives, that was just, that was so wrong. Taking these men's wives for all eternity, being sealed to them. Some of them while they're on missions, and who knows else what was going on. And the apologetics in the church is just ridiculous. So they say, guys got like Brian Hill saying, hey, well, they weren't making out. You can't prove it. Right. Even if they weren't, their family's destroyed for all eternity, which, of course, they ignore. So I thought, look, you're faithfully serving, and the prophet comes and steals your wife for all eternity, has her sealed to him. How's, everything you were laboring for to have your eternal family, your loved ones with you, and the prophet screws you over. Takes your family away from you while you're out serving a mission. So, I guess there was a floodgate at some point. Actually, I know exactly when it was. When I discovered like Mormon stories, and I found out other people were disturbed by the same things as me. I'll take a break.